My name is Sergeant Anthony Smith. Do you guys ever feel like things just aren't working? Like you're trying really hard to do something, but it's not really working out for you? I had something happen this morning that really helped me kind of regroup and say to myself, maybe the way that I'm doing things aren't working. I've been teaching suicide prevention for probably about a decade, and I've really felt like when Robin asked me to come speak, that maybe I should tailor my message a little differently, because maybe the way that I do things aren't the right way, or maybe I need to change and look at things from a different perspective. And so everything I'm going to talk about today, I'm just going to be inviting you guys to think about things from a different perspective also. All right, I want to tell you about what happened this morning. So I was supposed to stay in a hotel here in Moundsville, but when we booked it on the DTS, it sent me to Wheeling. And that was a little frustrating. But when I got up this morning and hopped in my car, I didn't know where I was, so I was following GPS and I missed a turn. So after I realized I missed the turn, I also noticed I was crossing the Ohio River. And my math inside of my head was telling me, wait, I'm not supposed to be going to Ohio if I'm going to Moundsville, West Virginia. So I knew something wasn't right there. Well, there was a police officer, looked to me, had a car pulled over on the side of the bridge. And so everybody was slowing down and kind of merging over. And when I got close to the police officer, I realized he was out of his vehicle and he was looking down at the water. I don't know what he was doing, but it really bothered me. And it helped validate inside of my mind and my spirit that the message that Robin wanted me to share today was the one that I needed to tell. So it's not your standard suicide prevention brief, and it's also not something that's sanctioned or developed by the National Guard. It's just my opinion. It's about how I see things, and then some of the things that I do on the civilian side as well with suicide prevention. So, all right, I'm gonna ask you to close your eyes, and I'm gonna close my eyes too. So I want you guys to trust me. One of the first things that you learn as a child in a healthy family is trust. And I want you guys to take a deep breath in on the count of 4. We're gonna breathe in through our nose and then breathe out through our mouth. All right, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, keep your eyes closed. We're gonna do it again, except this time, when we breathe in, we're gonna hold our breath at the top for just a second. It doesn't have to be real long. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for a second. And out. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, one more time. In through your nose. Hold it. Out through your mouth. All right, you can open your eyes. Normally I have 87 slides. Would you guys be excited to see those? No? Instead, I just wrote down 5 points that I just wanted to talk about. Is that cool with you? Anybody want to see the 87 slides? Usually there's a first sergeant that likes that. No? All right, I'll just stick to my 5 points then. That's way more entertaining and it allows for more of a discussion. My name is Sergeant Anthony Smith. On the civilian side, I work in behavioral health, and it's called a qualified mental health professional. So it's a licensure from Virginia that allows me to interact with clients who have intellectual disabilities. And that's everything from bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. There's a wide range, autism. Each one of my clients have had suicidal ideation in the past because in fact, that's a requirement for them to qualify through Medicaid for the services that we provide. On the National Guard side, I hold a behavioral health MOS as well, among other things. I've got a few MOSs. And then like I mentioned before, I also teach some classes with Robin, suicide prevention related, ACE, ASSIST. But everything that I just told you about myself is actually a little different than the message that I want to share with you today. First, let's talk about the definition of suicide. Can somebody give me what a definition, just in layman's terms? Somebody want to volunteer what a definition of suicide is? Who's got one? Go ahead. Perfect. Yeah, it's the act of taking one's own life. So that was pretty close. Yeah, that is exactly right. That definition seems pretty cut and dry, but when I started teaching suicide prevention about a decade ago, I realized that it was a little bit more blurry than I thought. Has anybody ever used the term committed suicide? Raise your hand if you've ever said that word. That person committed suicide. There's been a big push in the social work world over the past, say, 5 to 10 years to change the terminology. Because the term committed entails what? That you've done what? If you've committed something. Any ideas? What have you committed?
Signed a contract.
I'm saying? Say again?
Contract.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you signed a contract, different kind of contract. A crime, exactly. So it entails that as a crime. All of the states used to have, I can't say all, probably most, used to have laws that made it a crime to try to take your own life. Those laws became outdated and weren't used anymore. And then each of the states individually started to decriminalize suicide. And there's only one state that I know of, unless somebody can correct me, that still technically has it on its books, and that's the state of Virginia, where I live. I think that Virginia is trying to pass some legislature to do away with that terminology. So when you say committed suicide, are they committing a crime or are they not? So there's some better ways that you could say it. Some people have suggested died by suicide or suicided. So that really challenges us to think differently about the words that we use. The words that we use have power, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. What we say, what comes out of our mouth, those words, they have influence over the things that we do in our life and how we live our life. So our words are very important. So I just wanted to point out that fact when you're talking about committed suicide and the word suicide in general. So you guys are familiar with conscious and subconscious mind. This is where my talk's going to be just a little bit different. So we have a conscious mind that makes decisions. We use that a lot in the military. So we see ABC and we make the decision from that. Sometimes we make decisions from our subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind is not as easy to define. It's something that's not cut and dry. It's kind of a mysterious thing to us. You know, we say sometimes that maybe when we dream, it's our subconscious mind acting out scenarios. We don't really know, but that's the theory that they use. But there's much more to our lives than what we can sense with our 5 senses, taste, touch, and all those. So if you look at how an atom is structured, we're made out of atoms, if you get down to the smallest level. If you look how an atom is structured, it's actually 99.99999, 4 nines, empty space because of the electron going around. But what makes it look solid is the electrons going around so fast that it makes it look like a solid object. So when we look at our arm, we see an arm, but in actuality, if we shrunk down, we could fly right through our arm. So that always made me think, well, if I'm 0.0001 empty space, then what am I? Maybe there's some things there that I don't recognize, that I can't see with my own eyes. Somebody pointed out an experiment to me about 5 years ago that changed the way that I thought about suicide prevention. I'd like to say that I have it down and I have it all figured out, but I don't. But I wanted to tell you guys about it because it might be an experiment that you guys can do on your own to see it with your own eyes. Has anybody ever heard of the rice experiment? Or what about Dr. Emoto's water experiment? No? So this is the first time you've heard about it? So the rice experiment is you cook up some white rice and then you get 2 separate jars and you put that same batch of white rice into 2 different jars. At that point, they're exactly the same. The only difference is you label one love and then you label the other jar hate. Does anybody have any guesses what happens to those jars over time? If you had to guess, what would happen to those jars? One's labeled love, and the other one's labeled hate. Well, somebody told me if you did that, and then every time you see the love jar, you say, as silly as it sounds, you say, I love you to the love jar. And then anytime you're having a bad day, you yell at the hate jar, that it actually changes the hate jar brown. And I didn't believe them. So I do this experiment with each one of my clients, and I've probably done about 12 or 15 times. And every single time over the course of probably about 4 to 8 weeks, the love jar, that rice stays white. And then the hate jar turns brown. So that talks about the power of our words. So we have to be careful about what we're saying to others, and then also that internal dialogue of how we talk about ourselves to ourselves. I can't tell you the science behind the rice jar or how that works. I'm not that smart of a person, to be honest with you. But when I saw it with my own eyes, it sure changed the way I talk to my kids. And then I also had to challenge myself with the internal dialogue that I have about who I am. Is there anybody here that's not on social media? Okay, I just got off of social media in October. I was doing a suicide awareness campaign on social media, and so I was involved with all of it. Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter. Never got to hang a TikTok, not my thing. And I decided, based on what I remembered about the rice experiment, that it wasn't healthy for me, and now research is starting to back up this theory that I had to myself, is it's not helpful for me to completely inundate my mind with negative stuff all day long. And it seems, I won't say it's funny, but it seems that I got off at the right time. Because you think about what's happened in the world today with all the challenges that we have. I've made it a point not to have that playing on a screen in front of my brain every single day, because I kept thinking about that hate jar. So I'm not telling anybody to get off social media. It's just, all of this is just for you to think about. And I'm just inviting you guys to think about things just a little bit differently. There's a guy named Neville Goddard, and he had a really interesting theory that I've always liked ever since I first read about it. And he said that feelings are the only thing that matters. And I was like, at the time when I first read it, I was like, I don't want to talk about feelings. You know, I was raised up in a world where I really wasn't supposed to talk about how I felt about things because it didn't matter. I just did what I was told to do by my parents. But after reading his book, it really made a lot of sense to me that feelings are important. You could have one person who goes through a divorce and they're just torn apart about it. Tough relationship, they're having a hard time managing and coping. Or you could have another person that goes through a divorce and be happy as everything. They might even get married and divorced a second time just so they can go through the divorce again. So it wasn't the event, it wasn't the circumstance that determined their life, it was how they felt about it. It was the interpretation of the event. And that's true with anything that happens in your life. So I grew up in a poor family, but I never felt poor. I didn't have what my friends had. So who was the one that was poor? It certainly wasn't me. I didn't perceive it that way. And so the words that Neville Goddard said really meant a lot to me. So we all have challenges being in the military. We have deployments. We come off of deployment. We go back and integrate back into civilian life. That's a challenge that people around us can't understand. Some people handle it one way, and some people handle it another way. Which way is the right way? Well, neither of them. It just depends on how we perceive it. So you might say, well, Tony, how do I change the way I feel about things? I'm not saying you can, but I do know that going outside of yourself, there are certain times in your life we have to. We need all kinds of resources here today where you reach out, make contact. But I wanted to introduce another source to you guys, and that's what's on the inside of you. What's on the inside of you is a resource too. There's nobody in the world that knows you like you. They don't know what you've been through. They don't know who you are, where you came from. But you have tools inside of yourself that you can turn to. Why don't we turn to them? Well, because we busy ourselves with outside influences, Facebook and Twitter, TikTok. We don't quiet our mind and go within ourselves to see what we really need as human beings. I might want $1 million, but the $1 million isn't actually what I want. What I want is the feeling that $1 million gives me. Well, if I can go for a run and that makes me feel like $1 million, then I'm not really missing the $1 million. It's the feeling of having it. So I want to tell you just real quickly about my story. So I had suicidal ideation when I was about 13. At the time, I discovered I loved running, which fit really well into the military. And I did a lot of running when I was little. I didn't know that that was like a coping skill that they call coping skill. I didn't know that that was something that I was turning to help myself through. I just know that it felt good. I guess it was the natural endorphins or the opportunity to go visit my friends where, you know, I didn't have parents that could take me to see them. So I'd just run or walk to their house and it just made me feel good. There was a little bit of validation for my friends. They're like, wow, Tony, you ran all the way here from your house. And that felt good too. But I grew up in a poor family. And remember at the beginning, I said that the first thing you learn in a healthy family is trust. I didn't learn that in my family. Has anybody else ever felt like they didn't learn a lot of things from their family? That wasn't a part of my growing up, was trust. I couldn't trust. We had ailments of all kinds. Mental disorders, substance abuse, health issues, diabetes, cancer, heart disease. And I felt like I was just thrown in there and I didn't fit in because I didn't consider myself poor. I didn't consider myself unhealthy. But one thing that did bother me is that if this is what life had to offer, I didn't want to stick around to enjoy it because I wasn't enjoying it. Well, one day we got a piece of mail for the neighbor. It was a lady that lived down the street that I had never met. She lived just right down over the hill. Her name was Zella Warner. She was probably about, I would say 87 at the time, and I was 12. I took the mail down to her. She invited me to come in. She's like, hey, you guys lived up there for 6 months. I haven't met you, you know, have some cookies or whatever. Fast forward a little bit, Zella and I become friends. She would invite me in. She would invite me to just talk about who I was and the things that interest me. And that was during the time that I was having suicidal ideation. And she could sense that in me. She might not have been able to put her thumb on it, but she could sense that this little boy had some stuff going on. One day she asked me what my hope was. And I was like, what I hope to get for Christmas? Like I didn't understand. She said, no, when you wake up in the morning, what is your hope? What do you look forward to? What opens your eyes? And I said, well, I like to run. She's like, good. And do you ever plan on like running races or anything? And I said, I want to run across the country. This was before Forrest Gump. I thought, wow, that just seemed exciting to me. Something in my spirit was excited from the whole concept of like running across the country. So when I look back on that experience with Zella, she was there for me. It was a relationship that was built. There was trust. I could depend on her. I knew exactly who she was. I knew exactly what she was all about and that she had my best interests in mind. Another thing I learned is that I had curiosity inside me. Sometimes I say that suicide prevention, one of the best suicide prevention methods out there is just curiosity. We're just curious about life. I wonder how that's going to turn out. Or I wonder if I can make it through. Or I'm curious about this topic, or I want to learn about that. And those are all forward-thinking concepts. It doesn't allow you to kind of sulk in a current situation that, quite honestly, could be temporary. Situations change from time to time. We might be poor today, but have money 3 years from now after we get a better job. Those situations change. Our feelings about those situations change too, and they can change. One thing that's always bothered me about the suicide prevention field is that the word suicide is in it. So psychology told me, whatever you focus on, you become. So if you want to go on a diet and lose weight, and you say to yourself every day, don't eat cake, don't eat cake, don't eat cake, what are you going to eat? You're gonna eat cake, right? But yet we have this program that we want people to be successful and live through, and it's got the word suicide in it. And that's always bothered me. I always thought, well, couldn't we just change the word? Life enhancement, well, I don't know what you can call it. But why do we call it suicide prevention? Because our subconscious mind can only hear the word suicide. That's just like the subconscious mind can only hear cake. That's just the way that our minds work. I'm not suggesting what to change it to or that it needs to be changed. That's just something that's never set right in my spirit. Instead, I think we should just focus on living. How do you do that? You breathe. That's what we did. Breathing is probably the opposite of suicide, right? So we did some breathing together. We built trust. Trust leads to relationships. Relationships can be protective factors against that. And that's really the key of what I wanted to get across today to you guys. So all we have to do is just breathe. There's something about breathing that is calming. That's why I wanted to start out with doing that first. Totally different than anything else that we do in the past. Maybe I'm trying to learn from my mistakes and tailor my message to reach different people. My message might not be for one of you. You might hear me and say, well, that didn't make any sense what he was talking about atoms and rice. I didn't get it. But we have other resources here too that you might get and that you might understand. I just wanted to show you guys that you do have another resource that's inside of yourself that you can turn to. I'm not suggesting ways that you could do that. A lot of people do it different ways. I found mine in running. Some people might find it in meditation or gardening or in friendships. Mine definitely was in running. But that's something that you have to discover for yourself, process of discovery. And you'll find that the longer you stick here on earth, the more coping skills and strengths, those personal strengths that you have on the inside, you'll find out that you have more of them because you learn more about yourself as you go. So just to wrap up, one of these days, none of us will be here. And whenever we're gone, people might not remember all the little details about you. You certainly won't remember do you remember my title, what I said I was, that licensure in Virginia? Something about mental health, right? You're not going to remember that about me. What you're going to remember is how it made you feel. That's what you'll remember. And you'll also remember that it's really stinking hot out here. So when we're all gone, just know that your loved ones are going to remember how you make them feel. And just like Zella Warner, she asked me those questions of what was my hope. Make sure you don't go to bed tonight without knowing what your friends and your family members are hopeful for. Because you don't know if just asking them that question could be a pivotal moment in their life. Zella certainly didn't know that it was for me. That's all I got, First Sergeant.